Good morning. Members of the Board of Trustees, Principal Patterson, faculty, staff, families, guests, and especially the graduates of 2023. Thank you for this invitation. I must say that I am humbled by it. To speak at an event at Greater New York Academy, as you've heard, is my high school alma mater. I am a member of the graduating class of 1981. I'm also a former teacher, as you've heard, of this institution, having taught at Greater New York Academy from 1988 to 1993. In fact, something you didn't hear is that Mr. S is a former student of mine, okay? And it is because of Mr. S that I have a special connection to this class. You see, back in January of this year, I was on campus as part of a recruitment for Southern Adventist University. And while talking to the senior class, I mentioned to them that I had taught Mr. S. And one student, and I wish I remember who he is, and maybe if you remember, you can raise your hand, stopped me in astonishment. Wait. He started an alarm. You're older than Mr. S? Okay. When you tell a 60-something-year-old that he looks younger than one of your current faculty, you fall in love with the class, and I'm in love with you. Okay? I bring you greetings from Southern Adventist University, the largest undergraduate Adventist university in the United States. In fact, this fall, in August, we are expecting to have the largest freshman class in the history of the institution, and we've been around for over 100 years. We are growing at a time when lots of colleges and universities in this country are closing. Okay? So we are bucking the trend. We are being blessed by Jesus Christ. So we must be doing something that he can bless. The title of my address this morning, 20 is the New 30, comes from a book written by the clinical psychologist Dr. Meg Jay, who gets paid tens of thousands of dollars to tell her audiences why your 20s, graduates, are more important than any decade you will experience after them. Now, of course, you're 1, 2, maybe 3 years away from the 20s. But an example of the advice she gives you is that research in the medical field of obstetrics now shows us that delaying parenthood until your 30s, which a lot of your peers will do, is not a good idea. We know now that the difficulty of having children in one's 30s has become more and more extreme. A woman in her 20s has a 1 in 3 to a 1 in 4 chance of getting pregnant. When she reaches her 30s, she has a little more than a 1 in 10 chance of getting pregnant. Okay? In her book, Dr. J describes several other trends that 20-somethings are into right now, according to research. And those trends do not lead to the goals that most high school graduates have for themselves. This morning, then, I wish to give you some advice for the next decade of your life, but specifically also the next 4 to 6 years of your life. My advice is based on 30 years of having worked in higher education, but it's also based on facts and research. And so here goes. It's just 4 items. Number 1, fast. We Christians, you know that fasting is something that you're familiar with, whether you do it or not, okay? But I'm not talking about the fast that comes to mind when I say the word to you. I'm talking about fasting from social media. The iPhone was born in 2007. Although social media has been around a lot longer than that, what's interesting about the year 2007 is that not long after that year, in fact, 1 year later, suicide and depression rates began to increase in this country. after decades of going down year after year after year, and they've been climbing ever since. We had a little bit of a dip here in 2020, but now they're climbing again. Suicide and depression has always been a problem with 20-somethings. But in the last 15 years, suicide and depression are at crises levels among 20-somethings. In fact, and this is a fact, folks, this is not me talking. In fact, Gen Z states that they are the loneliest generation of individuals in this country, okay? Your generation, graduates, admits to higher levels of loneliness than any other group on the face of this earth. At about the 10-year anniversary of the iPhone, social researchers began to wonder if there was a connection between the popularity that smartphones had made of social media and sites like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, among others. And what they found was that there was indeed a connection. In the 7 years since the research, what we've learned, what the social researchers have learned, is that there is indeed a connection between social media and the increasing rates of suicide and depression in this country. Although the smartphone and although social media has made life so much easier, okay? The easier access to social media has also led to higher levels of depression and thus higher levels of loneliness and suicide. Why? Because social media subtly encourages comparisons. Whether you want to or not, you are constantly comparing yourself to other people's looks, other people's clothes, other people's dating status, and other people, period. If you want then to start living the next decade of your life in your 20s, get into the practice of taking a fast from your phones, okay? Don't let FOMO, the fear of missing out, ruin the next 10 to 12 years of your life. Advice number 2, and this one's gonna shock you. Take a break from college. What? And your parents are probably thinking, what are you talking about? Okay? One of the goals most high school graduates have when entering college is to graduate in 4 years. And your parents are probably telling you, we'll fund 4 years of your college, okay? In my 30 years in higher ed, I have never talked to a freshman who said, yeah, I think I'll graduate in 8 years, okay? Yet, what higher education experts are now are seeing is that taking a gap year actually results in greater levels of fulfillment during and after your college years. For some of you, that gap year may be coming this year, and that's okay. And here's the reason why. A college education is expensive whether you chose to stay in New York City or head to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where Southern Adventist University is. Like what I did there? Okay. If you are graduating from Greater and you hate school, then maybe you need to take your gap year right now, okay? Now, your parents don't like that I'm saying that, okay? But that gap year will do wonders for you for when you are ready to enter higher education. But if you choose to take a year off to serve as a student missionary or to take a lighter year of studying abroad in Europe or South America, you will restart your education in the States with a higher level of fulfillment that will be more difficult to attain if you didn't. Every year, Southern sends 60 to 80 students to work as student missionaries in other countries. Another 100 or so of them go to study abroad in countries like Argentina and Spain to work on their Spanish fluency, to France to work on French, Italy, Italian, Israel, Hebrew, Austria, German, and many other countries to broaden their horizons as young 20-somethings. And what we've learned is that those students admit to the highest levels of fulfillment at Southern. In other words, they chose not to worry about graduating in 4 years so that they could begin earning good money as soon as possible. Instead, they took a gap year, and the result is better focused on what they want to study and what they want to do after college. My son graduated in 2020 from an academy. One of his good friends went to Africa after her freshman year in college. She went there to be a student missionary and to work at a medical facility in the country of Zimbabwe. She thought she was going to be working in a medical facility. What she didn't know was that she actually spent more time in a dental clinic. She posted on her IG account lots of pictures, and many of them were of her pulling teeth from natives of the country. When she came back to the United States and continued her education, she had changed her major from pre-med to pre-dent, okay? Taking a break from the 4-year routine of finishing college proved to be a good idea for her, and it's proven to be a good idea for a number of people. So advice number 2, take a break. Advice number 3, be flexible. And what I mean is don't head into college with your mind set up on one major, okay? Up to 75% of college students will change their majors at least once before they finally graduate. So if you change your major, that's okay. You're in good company. One recent graduate at Southern Adventist University changed her major a record 13 times before finally earning a diploma. And she's in the workforce today. And if that statistic is not convincing for you, try this one on for size. Over 60% of the workforce in the United States that has earned a 4-year degree does not even work in the field of that diploma, okay? I'm a good example of that. My undergraduate degree is theology. I have never been a pastor, okay? I have a sister in the audience. Her degree is in law. She's working in cosmetic development, okay? My son-in-law just graduated last month with a degree in communications. He starts a job in August in hospital management, okay? In other words, what colleges are now doing and what Southern and many other Adventist universities are now doing is making sure that whatever degree you choose to take, that it fits whatever calling God has for you, okay? Now, one of the reasons so many college graduates are working in other fields is that the workforce you will enter in will be different from the workforce that we have today. Here's a list of jobs that didn't exist 15 years ago. Did not exist, okay? The driverless car engineer, social media influencer, blockchain analyst. And some of you think, what is blockchain? Well, I had to look it up myself, okay? That's cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin, okay? Podcast producer, telemedicine physician, cloud architect, Uber driver, drone operator, and listen to this one, chief listening operator. In other words, there are vice presidents who are assigned to just simply listen. Folks, the world that we're going to have in 5-10 years is going to be different from the one we're going to have now. And one of the reasons why is the advent of, not the advent, but what AI is now doing to our society. There will be jobs that just don't exist right now. Being flexible then will result in a lot less stress as you study in your early 20s. I have one more piece of advice. Now, I was told I had a lot of time, as much time as I wanted to speak. But here's the reality. Most of you aren't going to even remember what I said today, okay? So I've just one more piece of advice. My last piece of advice is a nod to the fact that you are graduating from a high school that places God at the center of its education. So number 4, trust God that He has a plan for your future. Here I want to tell you a personal story about an event that has impacted my recent life more than any other. I told you about my son who graduated in 2020. He graduated during the height of COVID, meaning his graduation was postponed. It was supposed to be a graduation in May. Most graduations in the South occur in May. But he graduated in August. August 2020. He had started already in college when he had his high school graduation. In December 2020, just a couple months after he graduated from high school and had started college, he was killed in a car accident, driving home from paying a visit to his grandmother. During his memorial service, over 500 people showed up at the church. And because it was COVID, and it was a church that could hold over 2,000 people, only 500 people were allowed in the building. Another 2,000 watched the streaming of the service live. While my family was touched by the number of people who showed up, no one person impacted us more that day than a former pastor of mine from when I was a little kid living on Staten Island. He just happened to be there, he and his wife. He and his wife expressed their condolences to my family and then said, "We read your son's devotion this morning." My wife and I, we looked at each other. "What are you talking about?" And what they told me reinforced in my mind that I serve a God who not only knows my past, not only knows my present, but also knows my future. You see, when my son was a sophomore in academy, he had an assignment in his Bible class to write a devotional. And it was a devotional for specifically the devotional book that his academy puts out every year. Putting a book of 365 devotions out every single year takes a lot of time. In fact, you don't decide, I'm going to write the devotional book and it's going to come out this same year. It's normally a 2 or 3 year process. So here he was, a sophomore, and the editor of the book was coming up with a theme, finding 365 different verses of the Bible on that theme, finding writers, editing the writings, and then putting each devotion in an order. Think about that. 2.5 years before my son died, he was writing a devotion for a book that would come out 2.5 years later. All of that took 2.5 years. And so when my son wrote his devotion on heaven, he did so over 2 years before he died a tragic death. But the miraculous part of this story is that God knew that his family would need a final message from him after he died. You see, the editor of that devotional book chose to place his devotional on the day of his memorial service, 2.5 years later. More than 2 years before he died, the editor of that book was directed by God to place his devotion on December 22, 2020, the day that his family would be memorializing his life. God knew on that day his family would need affirmation of my son's love for Jesus Christ, and thus could be assured that we would be reunited in heaven. Graduates, whether you chose the Greater New York Academy, to go to Greater New York Academy on your own, or your parents chose it for you, the primary reason is that those parents or you wish for Jesus Christ to be the center of your futures. Amen. Trust God. Jeremiah 29:11 reads, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." So while it is important for you during your 20-somethings to take an occasional fast from social media, to be willing to take a gap year, and to be flexible, the most important advice I have for you is to trust God. When you don't know what field to study in college, trust God. When homesickness hits you because you are far away from home for the first time, trust God. When your anxiety level is at a level that you have never experienced before, trust God. When that guy or girl you want to get to know better won't give you the time of day, trust God. When you realize that the best athlete at Great in Your Academy makes you just one of hundreds of great athletes in college, trust God. When your grades aren't as good as they were in high school, trust God. When you think you need to change your major, trust God. When you lose a loved one, trust God. When money is running low and you don't know how you are going to pay for the rest of your college education, trust God. Graduates of Great New York Academy, I have witnessed firsthand what trusting God has done for my life. Don't wait until you are 30 or older to trust the all-knowing, all-present, all-powerful God. During the next decade, trust God and create the relationship with Him that will make you strong until He comes again. Your class aim is to question the expected and overcome the impossible. Trusting God will help you to accomplish those goals. Graduates, I have given you 4 pieces of advice. But the most important is to trust God. Don't leave Great New York Academy saying, my chapter with God is over. Make God a part of your lives. Make God a part of your college lives. Trust Him. Take a step in faith, and you will see a difference in your 20-somethings and therefore afterwards.